The auditorium at Montclair Elementary buzzed with anticipation as parents shuffled into folding chairs, smartphones already in hand. It was the annual spring showcase, where third graders would perform poetry recitations they'd been practicing for weeks. The California afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the makeshift stage, adorned with colorful paper flowers and hand-painted backdrops. Riley Curry sat backstage with her classmates, her small hands smoothing down the navy blue dress Aisha had carefully chosen that morning. At 8 years old, she was already accustomed to being in the spotlight, NBA games, press conferences, family events, but this felt different. This was her moment, not just another appearance as Stephen Curry's daughter. "You've got this, Ry," whispered her best friend Emma, squeezing her hand. "You know that poem better than anyone." Riley nodded, though her stomach felt like it was doing backflips. She'd recited "The Road, Not Taken" by Robert Frost hundreds of times in front of her bedroom mirror, in the car, even while shooting baskets with her dad. But now, with the murmur of voices growing louder beyond the curtain, doubt crept in like fog rolling over the Bay Area hills. In the audience, Stephen Curry adjusted his Warriors cap and scanned the program, finding Riley's name listed fourth. He'd cleared his entire afternoon schedule for this. No practice, no meetings, no interviews. Aisha sat beside him, nervously checking her phone's camera settings while baby Cannon dozed in his carrier. "There's Channel 7, Aisha whispered, nodding toward a news crew setting up in the back. "And is that from ESPN? Stephen's jaw tightened slightly. He'd hoped for a quiet family moment but knew that came with the territory. Riley had specifically asked them to come, and missing her performance wasn't an option, cameras or not. Mrs. Henderson, Riley's teacher, peeked through the curtain at the packed auditorium. What had started as a small school event had somehow attracted local media attention when word spread that the Curry family would be attending. She watched parents jostling for better camera angles and reporters discreetly positioning themselves along the walls. "Remember, children," she said, turning back to her nervous students, "just like we practiced. Look for friendly faces in the audience, speak clearly, and don't rush. Your families are here because they love you." Riley's heart hammered against her ribs. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see her parents in the third row, her dad's familiar smile and her mom's encouraging wave. But she also saw the sea of unfamiliar faces, the glinting phone screens, and the professional cameras that seemed to multiply by the minute. The first 3 performances went smoothly: a poem about friendship, a short monologue about dreams, and a humorous piece about pets. Each child received warm applause, their families beaming with pride. Riley watched from the wings, her confidence wavering with each passing moment. "Riley Curry," Mrs. Henderson announced with a warm smile, reciting "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost. The applause was notably louder, phones lifting in unison like a digital wave. Riley stepped onto the stage, the bright lights hitting her face as she moved to the center spot marked with tape. She could see her parents clearly now, her dad giving her a thumbs up, her mom blowing a kiss. She opened her mouth to begin, but no words came. The auditorium, which had been buzzing with quiet conversation and camera clicks, gradually fell silent. Riley stood frozen, her mind completely blank, as if someone had erased every word she'd ever learned. The poem that had flowed so naturally just hours before had vanished completely. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Her face flushed red, and she could feel tears beginning to well up in her eyes. The silence became deafening, broken only by the occasional cough or whispered comment from the audience. Camera phones continued recording, capturing every moment of her distress. In the third row, Stephen Curry felt his heart break a little as he watched his daughter struggle. This was his little girl, the same one who sang Disney songs at the top of her lungs in the car and told elaborate bedtime stories to her stuffed animals. Now she stood alone on that stage, paralyzed by the very attention that had become such a normal part of their family's life. Stephen watched his daughter's shoulders begin to shake slightly, recognizing the signs from countless bedtime conversations about her fears and worries. Riley had always been the most sensitive of his children, feeling things deeply and wearing her emotions openly. She'd confided in him just last week about being nervous for the performance, afraid she might mess up in front of everyone. The audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some parents looked sympathetic, remembering their own children's stage fright, while others seemed more interested in capturing the dramatic moment on their phones. Stephen noticed a few reporters leaning forward, sensing a story developing. "She's okay. She just needs a moment," Aisha whispered, though her own voice carried worry. But Stephen could see it in Riley's eyes. The same look she'd had when she was 5 and got lost in a department store. Pure panic mixed with embarrassment. His paternal instincts kicked in, overriding any concern about cameras or public perception. Without hesitation, Stephen stood up from his seat. The movement caught the attention of those around him, creating a ripple effect as heads turned to see what the NBA superstar would do. Camera operators swiveled their equipment toward him, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Instead of calling out to Riley or trying to coach her from his seat, Stephen did something unexpected. He began walking toward the stage, his expression calm and reassuring. The auditorium fell completely silent now, everyone holding their breath to see what would unfold. Mrs. Henderson started to move forward, uncertain about protocol, but Stephen caught her eye and gave a gentle nod that somehow communicated he had this handled. Years of reading defenses and making split-second decisions on the court had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct told him his daughter needed him beside her, not cheering from the sidelines. Riley saw her father approaching and felt a mix of relief and mortification. Part of her wanted to run off the stage and hide, but another part, the part that remembered all the times he'd helped her through difficult moments, felt a glimmer of hope. Stephen climbed the few steps to the stage with the same easy confidence he brought to Oracle Arena, but his focus was entirely on Riley. He walked over to where she stood frozen and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Hey, there, superstar," he said softly, his voice carrying just enough to reach the front rows. "Remember what we talked about? About how everyone here is rooting for you?" Riley looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Daddy, I forgot everything. All the words are gone." "That's okay," Stephen replied, crouching down to her eye level so they could talk face to face. "Words come back. They always do. But you know what? I have an idea." The audience watched in fascination as father and daughter had their quiet moment on stage. Phones continued recording, but the energy had shifted from voyeuristic curiosity to genuine emotional investment in the scene unfolding before them. "What if we did it together?" Stephen suggested. "You know how we practice together at home? Just like that, but here." Riley wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, considering this. "But everyone's watching." "They sure are," Stephen acknowledged with a smile. "And you know what they're seeing? They're seeing a brave little girl who's trying something hard, and a dad who's really proud of her no matter what happens." He stood up and faced the audience, still keeping one comforting hand on Riley's shoulder. "Folks, my daughter Riley has been working really hard on a beautiful poem, and she's asked me to help her share it with you all. Is that okay with everyone?" The response was immediate and warm. Applause mixed with calls of, "Yes!" and "Go Riley!" The atmosphere in the room had completely transformed from awkward tension to collective support. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with a wireless microphone, handing it to Stephen with a grateful smile. "Of course, Mr. Curry. We'd love to hear it." Stephen adjusted the microphone and looked down at Riley, who had stopped crying and was now looking more curious than frightened. "Ready, Ry? Let's show them what we've been practicing." Riley nodded, taking a deep breath as her father held the microphone between them. The auditorium remained perfectly quiet, but it was a different kind of silence now, expectant rather than uncomfortable, supportive rather than judgmental. "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood," Stephen began, his voice clear but gentle, giving Riley the opening she needed. "And sorry I could not travel both," Riley continued, her voice small but growing stronger with each word. The familiar rhythm of the poem, combined with her father's steady presence, began to unlock the words she'd thought were lost forever. They alternated lines, sometimes speaking together, creating an impromptu duet that was far more moving than any solo recitation could have been. Stephen's deep, measured voice provided a foundation for Riley's higher, more delicate tones. When she hesitated on a line, he would softly prompt her, and when she gained confidence, he would step back and let her voice carry the verse. "And I took the one less traveled by," they said together for the final lines, "and that has made all the difference." The auditorium erupted in applause, not just polite acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation for what they'd witnessed. Parents were wiping their eyes, teachers were beaming, and even the reporters seemed moved by the intimate moment they'd been privileged to observe. Riley looked up at her father with shining eyes, the fear completely gone now, replaced by pride and joy. Stephen handed the microphone back to Mrs. Henderson and gave his daughter a high five that turned into a warm hug. "That was beautiful," Mrs. Henderson said into the microphone. "Thank you both for sharing that with us." As Stephen walked Riley back to join her classmates for the closing song, he could hear whispered conversations throughout the audience. But these weren't the gossip-filled murmurs he sometimes heard at public events. These were parents talking about their own children, about stage fright and support, about the challenges of raising kids in an age of constant documentation. "That's what a real dad looks like?" he heard one mother say to another. "Did you see how she lit up when he joined her?" came another voice. In the front row, Emma's mom turned to the woman beside her. "My daughter gets so nervous about performing too. I never thought about joining her on stage, but look how well that worked." The final group song went off without a hitch, all the children singing, "This Land is Your Land," with enthusiasm and joy. Riley sang louder than anyone, her confidence fully restored. When they took their final bow, she waved specifically to her parents, her smile so radiant it could have powered the whole school. As families began to mingle afterward, Stephen found himself surrounded not by reporters seeking quotes about basketball, but by parents wanting to talk about parenting. A father of one of Riley's classmates approached him with genuine curiosity. "I have to ask," the man said, "were you nervous about going up there? I would have been terrified with all those cameras." Stephen considered the question thoughtfully. "Honestly, I didn't even think about the cameras. All I could see was my little girl needing help, and that's a pretty easy choice for any parent." Aisha joined them, Cannon now awake and gurgling happily in his carrier. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said, kissing Stephen's cheek and stroking Riley's hair. "That was better than any performance you could have planned." Riley, who had been accepting compliments from classmates and teachers, suddenly looked concerned. "Daddy, did I mess up the whole show? Are people going to be mad?" Stephen knelt down to her level again, a habit that had become second nature over the years. "Sweetheart, you didn't mess up anything. You did something really brave today. You got scared, which happens to everyone, and then you found a way to keep going. That's what courage looks like." Mrs. Henderson approached with her own phone, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you mind if I got a photo?" This is going to be one of those moments our school talks about for years. By evening, the video of Stephen and Riley's performance had found its way onto social media, shared first by parents who had been in the audience, then picked up by sports reporters, and finally spreading across platforms at the speed of modern connectivity. But something unexpected happened as the story traveled. It transformed from a celebrity sighting into something much more meaningful. The comments weren't focused on Stephen's basketball career or the Curry family's fame. Instead, they were filled with stories from other parents, teachers sharing their own classroom experiences, and people reflecting on moments of vulnerability and support in their own lives. "This is what parenting looks like," wrote one mother, sharing her own story of helping her son through a panic attack at a science fair. "As a teacher, I see this kind of stage fright all the time," commented an elementary school educator from Texas. "Most parents try to coach from the audience. This dad showed that sometimes you need to meet your child where they are." "My father never would have done this for me," wrote another person. Seeing this gives me hope for the kind of parent I want to be. Back at the Curry household in Atherton, the family sat around their kitchen island sharing takeout Chinese food and talking about the day. Cannon was in his high chair making a mess with rice, while Riley had changed into her favorite Warriors pajamas and was dramatically retelling the story to her little brother Ryan. And then Daddy came up on the stage, and I wasn't scared anymore, and we did the poem together, and everyone clapped so much, she explained, using hand gestures that knocked over her water cup. Stephen caught the cup before it could spill, laughing at his daughter's animated storytelling. Easy there, Broadway. Save some energy for school tomorrow. Are people going to treat me different now? Riley asked, suddenly serious. It was a question that showed wisdom beyond her 8 years, born from experience as the child of famous parents. Aisha and Stephen exchanged a look. They'd had versions of this conversation before, about attention and normalcy and the balance they tried to maintain for their children. Some might, Stephen said honestly, but the people who matter, your friends, your teachers, your family, they already knew how special you are. Today just reminded everyone. Else, Riley considered this, twirling lo mein noodles around her fork. I'm glad you came up there with me. I'm glad I could be there, Stephen replied. That's what dads are for. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Stephen and Aisha sat on their back patio overlooking the Bay Area lights. The air was cool and clear, carrying the scent of eucalyptus from the hills above their neighborhood. You know, Aisha said, curled up next to him on their outdoor sofa, I've watched you make impossible shots with thousands of people screaming, but I think today might have been the most impressive thing I've ever seen you do. Stephen was quiet for a moment, thinking about the afternoon. It wasn't even a choice, you know. She needed me, so I went. Everything else was just noise. That's what made it so beautiful, Aisha replied, and I think that's why it's resonating with so many people. In a world where everything feels complicated and calculated, you just did what any loving parent would do. Their phones had been buzzing all evening with messages from friends, family members, and colleagues who had seen the video. Teammates, coaches, even opponents from other NBA teams had reached out with supportive messages. But the ones that meant the most were from other parents, sharing their own stories and thanking them for the reminder that vulnerability and support go hand in hand. Check this out, Aisha said, showing Stephen a comment thread on Instagram. This, Mom is talking about how she's going to handle her daughter's piano recital next week differently because of what she saw today. Stephen scrolled through more comments, finding story after story of parents reflecting on their own approaches to their children's fears and challenges. Teachers were sharing it in education forums, child psychologists were discussing it as an example of supportive parenting, and thousands of people were simply saying thank you for showing what unconditional love looks like in action. I never thought a poem recitation would go viral, Stephen mused. It's not about the poem, Aisha pointed out. It's about showing up. It's about love being bigger than embarrassment or protocol, or what people might think. As they headed inside to check on the kids one more time before bed, Stephen peeked into Riley's room. She was fast asleep, clutching the stuffed Golden State Warriors bear he'd given her years ago, a small smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. Tomorrow she would wake up to find that her moment of stage fright had become a symbol of something much larger, a reminder that in a world obsessed with perfection and performance, there was still room for grace, support, and the simple act of a parent stepping in when their child needs them most. But for now, she was just a little girl who had faced her fears, found her voice, and learned that sometimes the best performances are the ones where you don't have to face the stage alone. The video would continue to spread, touching hearts across the country and around the world. Riley's teacher would frame a photo from that afternoon for her classroom wall. Other parents would find courage to support their own children differently. And somewhere in the Bay Area, a family would sleep soundly, knowing that love had made all the difference.